I don't remember when my name stopped being mentioned aloud. It didn't happen all at once, the way a door slams. It was slower than that, like when a drawer starts sticking and you learn to open it just slightly, just enough so it never quite closes right again. The telephone in the hallway still works. Corded beige, the kind with buttons that require pressure. Mark bought it for us years ago when the cordless one wouldn't hold charge. He said it was safer for older folks. Henry never liked it. He said the sound was too sharp. That morning, I was folding laundry, nothing special, just a few cotton shirts gone soft from years of wash when the phone lit up. I didn't answer. I rarely do now. It blinked to life and then to silence, and sometime after I walked past and pressed play. Voices. 2. I knew them before the first full sentence formed. Just make sure she doesn't find out okay. She'll only get confused. Julia flat as ever, as if trying to instruct a receptionist on flower orders. Then Mark. It's not about hurting her, it's logistics. She can't live there forever, Julia. It's too big, too much. A short laugh from her side, then something that sounded like ice clinking into a glass. Well, let's just say the less she knows right now, the smoother everything goes. That message deleted itself before I could hit rewind. I folded the last of the laundry and smoothed the hem of a dishcloth that had once been embroidered by my sister. She died last winter. Julia didn't attend the funeral. She said flights were expensive around the holidays. I didn't argue. That evening I set the table for one fork, one spoon, one napkin folded into quarters. I made soup and left half of it untouched. The phone didn't ring again. No one mentioned the word meeting, but it clung to me anyway. 2 days later, a letter arrived in an envelope too heavy for its content. It had the kind of paper you only use when something needs to feel serious. Thick off-white and creased twice with precision. I didn't open it right away. I boiled water. I reboiled it. I sat on the edge of Henry's armchair and held it under the lamplight like someone might hold a verdict. Inside, a notice of modification to the deed. Legal language I couldn't decode in full, but the intent was there. Clear as a gash, property held under shared family trust with named trustee Mark Whitaker. I didn't sign anything. The paper didn't mention me at all. Not even a line for consent. When I reached Mark on the phone, his voice had that slight echo of someone speaking on speakerphone, distracted. This is just to help organize things, Mom. Probate stuff. It's not permanent. I didn't authorize anything. No one's taking anything from you. It's temporary. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner for who? A pause. Maybe he muted me. Maybe he blinked once and moved on. There's no need to get emotional about it. You don't need to worry about every detail. I didn't say I was worried. I didn't say anything for a moment. He added, almost as an afterthought, "We'll go over everything at the meeting Saturday. Julia's hosting." I waited, but nothing followed. No invitation. No mention of a seat saved. I hung up before he could fill the silence with one of his managerial closings. "Thanks for your understanding," or "talk soon." Okay, I didn't speak to Julia. The next morning, I ironed the collar of Henry's old Oxford shirt. He hadn't worn it in years, but I kept it. Pale blue, soft around the edges. The kind of shirt you hang on the back of a door to let it breathe. I ran the iron slowly over the back pleat, careful not to burn the fabric. On the kitchen counter, the coffee had gone cold. I didn't reheat it. I stirred it once just to hear the spoon click the sides of the cup. In the living room, the family photo above the fireplace leaned ever so slightly to the left. I corrected it, then let it tilt again. Something about the crookedness felt honest. Later that day, I took a stack of letters Henry had stored in a shoebox, bank statements, tax forms, things with his signature, and laid them out on the dining table. His handwriting had grown smaller in his final years. Tight loops condensed as if trying to fit more of himself into less space. In one margin, a note he'd scribbled in pencil, check with Monroe, about asset protection. I never asked who Monroe was. I stepped out to the garden in the late afternoon. The carnations were already blooming early for the season. They didn't seem to care about the frost warnings. I knelt to clip one. The stem resisted as if it had something to say. My clippers shook slightly in my hand. Not from age, not from cold, just a tremor, a shift, something hairline, like the first sound a teacup makes before it cracks down the center. In the shed, Henry's gloves still hung by the door, stiff with time, but still bearing the shape of his hands. I didn't touch them. Inside, the answering machine blinked again. Another message. I didn't press play. Instead, I reached for the light switch and let the kitchen fall into its natural dim. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had weight. It sat next to me at the table. It moved through the house with gentle ownership. I thought of the phrase Julia had used, "She'll only make it difficult." Not cruel, not loud, but precise, like cutting away thread from a seam that no longer fits. I didn't weep. That would have made a sound. I didn't call anyone back. That would have been an offering. I held the cold cup in both hands and let it rest there. The handle pointed toward the window and I didn't move it. Sometimes the most honest thing a person can do is nothing. There was a time I thought being useful would be enough. It wasn't a loud decision, not something I said to myself in a mirror or wrote down in a list. It came quietly, like all the things that shaped me. A slow folding inward. A way of making space without being asked. A habit of finishing other people's sentences and cleaning up their crumbs without letting them notice. 5 years ago, when Henry had his first episode, I sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance with my wedding ring turned around on my finger. The nurses told me to stay calm, and I nodded. I always nodded. By then, I already knew how to become smaller in a room filled with urgency. Afterward, I called Mark from the hospital parking lot. The engine was still running. The nurse had given me a slip of paper with instructions. Low-sodium physical therapy rest. But what I remembered most was how she hadn't looked at me when she handed it over, as if I'd already known how to do all of this before. "We've got so much going on," Mark said when I told him. "I mean, Natalie's schedule is back-to-back, and I'm on that investor trip next week. Can you keep us posted by text?" I could. And I did. I didn't ask for help, not then. Not when the prescriptions needed adjusting. Not when Henry forgot how to button his shirt. Not when I woke twice each night to check he was still breathing. Later that year, when the weather turned and Henry's walking slowed, I brought it up again, just gently. "Maybe it's time I live closer. You know, in case something happens." Julia didn't look up from her phone. We were at her kitchen island, half a pie cooling between us. "Honestly, Mom, where would you even stay? We're barely fitting with Ellie back for the summer, and you've always said you love your own space. You're better off in your own house," Mark added that weekend. "Don't complicate things. You're settled." "It works. It works." I repeated that phrase in my head like a borrowed coat that doesn't quite fit. For 2 more years, I drove Henry to appointments, held his elbow on the stairs, rearranged the house so he wouldn't have to climb. No one offered to take a shift. I didn't ask. Every Sunday, I picked Ellie up from her theater rehearsals, fed her sandwiches in the car, listened to stories about professors I'd never meet, and classmates she didn't like. She once left a glittery scrunchie in the glove box. I kept it there long after she stopped riding with me. Julia told me not to bring her snacks. "She's on a nutrition plan," she said. "We're trying to teach her discipline." I brought sliced apples and wrapped them in paper towels, quietly. I never mentioned it again. When Ellie got into college, I sent a check to Julia each month. 500, then 300, then 5 again. I labeled them miscellaneous in my notebook. I never wrote a note with the money. Julia told me Ellie didn't need to know. She's already overwhelmed. Don't add more to her plate. So I didn't. I sent birthday cards, always on time, always with stamps that matched the season. I signed them. Just Grandma never loved Grandma Clara, because once Ellie teased me that long messages made her feel guilty. I took it as a hint. During holidays, I made green bean casserole, even though Julia switched to roasted Brussels sprouts 2 years ago. The casserole stayed untouched. The spoon rested clean. When Henry passed, I wore the same black coat I'd worn to my sister's funeral. The thread near the left cuff was coming loose, but no one noticed. I sat near the back during the reception because the chairs up front were taken before I arrived. I didn't ask anyone to move. I stood by the window until the coffee ran out. Julia told me at one point, between hugging a neighbor and complimenting someone's salad, "You're doing so well, Mom. I mean, all things considered." She meant I wasn't falling apart in front of anyone. Later that week, I found Henry's folder in the drawer by the bed. It was thick, with records, discharge papers, scans, home therapy plans. Some of the notes were written in my handwriting. Some were his shaky and angled like words, trying to hold on. One page was folded twice and stained with something dark, maybe coffee. I remembered sitting with it during one of his naps, trying to make sense of Medicare policies circling phrases I didn't understand. None of the kids had ever asked to see the papers. No one had called the doctors directly. Mark emailed once asking if Henry had made any updates to his insurance. I responded with a scanned copy. He never replied. I held the folder in my lap that night, not as proof, just as weight. The light in the room was dim. I didn't turn it brighter. There was a pen nearby one of Henry's. The ink had started to skip when I tested it on the edge of an envelope. Still, I tucked it into the folder. Small things deserve keeping even when they no longer work. I placed everything back where I found it. I didn't reach out to Julia. I didn't call Mark. I lay down in bed facing the side that used to be his. The pillow was flat. The sheets still bore his shape. In the silence, I counted the number of nights I had gone without asking for anything. Not favors, not help, not even recognition. I counted the number of times I'd been told, "You're stronger than most," or "We just assumed you had it handled," or "It's better this way, less disruptive." Each phrase had the same taste, stainless steel, polished, functional, not made for softness. I pulled the covers up to my chin and stared at the ceiling. Maybe they truly believed I preferred it this way. Maybe I let them believe it. I used to say it often, like a refrain. As long as my children are okay, that's all I need. But that wasn't all I needed. That was all I thought I was allowed to say. And when you don't ask to be seen, people eventually forget how to look. I didn't cry that night. That would have required permission from myself, if no one else. Instead, I closed my eyes and held that silence between my palms, not as punishment, not as protest, just as proof that I still existed in it. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from absence, but from something being deliberately left out. Last year, I brought an apple cake to Mark's birthday. I had peeled the fruit by hand, used the cinnamon Henry liked, folded the batter gently so it wouldn't sink. It was still warm when I carried it into their house. No one noticed the towel wrapped around the pan. No one offered to take it from my hands. Lisa smiled without meeting my eyes. "Oh, you didn't have to, Mom. I already ordered the triple chocolate one from Maggie's." She looked past me to someone else. "It's his favorite." "Remember," I nodded. I placed the cake on the side table next to a stack of unopened soda bottles and paper napkins, still in plastic wrap. By the end of the night, the foil was untouched. Not even a corner slice removed. Mark never mentioned it. No one asked to take any home. When I left, I considered carrying it back with me. Instead, I said goodnight, folded the foil tighter, and walked to the car with empty hands. At home, I placed it in the fridge. The next day, I sliced a piece and ate it cold. The apples had gone soft, the crust damp. It tasted fine, but the air around it felt used. The following spring, Julia hosted a celebration for Ellie's college acceptance. There were balloons with school colors, cupcakes shaped like books, and speeches that dragged longer than necessary. I stood at the back near the patio doors. It was warm, and I didn't want to take off my sweater. When it came time to toast, Julia clinked her glass and stood tall. "This milestone is a testament to love," she said. "To a family that's always supported Ellie through every test, every doubt, every triumph." Applause followed. Julia gestured toward Mark and Lisa, then toward her husband. Ellie looked down, smiling. No one looked toward me. My hand had cramped for weeks helping Ellie with scholarship essays. We had spent hours reviewing grammar on the sunroom couch, but there was no mention of late-night revisions. No toast to the woman who knew the difference between passive and active voice. I sipped from my cup. The ice had melted. The lemonade tasted thin. On our 30th anniversary, Henry and I sat in the living room while the children gave us their gift. A photo collage framed in faux wood. Most of the pictures were of Henry. Holding babies, planting trees, fixing the old fence. One included us both, but only in the background, me holding a coat while Henry laughed with Mark. There was a card. Inside, to Dad with all our love and family. There was no comma before and family. I ran my finger over the raised print on the envelope. It was the kind you buy in packs of 12 sold near the seasonal aisle. I didn't mention it. I thanked them. I hung the frame in the hallway next to the thermostat. Later that night, when Henry went to bed early, I sat with the card under a lamp and reread it. Then I placed it in the back of the drawer with the others. In my closet, I keep a shoebox. It once held sandals. I never wore leather too stiff, arch too high. Now it holds things that were meant to be gestures. Cards with names missing. Gift tags addressed to Henry with no room left for a second name. Thank you notes from Ellie in printed fonts signed E with no ink from a real pen. There's a scarf in there too. Pale blue, crocheted by hand. I made it for Lisa the first winter she married into the family. I never saw her wear it. 1 year later, I found it in their guest room closet, still folded in the gift bag. The tissue paper unwrinkled. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't reclaim it. Some objects hold more than their material. The cake pan with the floral lid, the cardigan with 2 buttons missing that I wore anyway. The recipe cards in Henry's handwriting, stained with oil. None of them were loud, but they stayed. There was one text from Ellie a few months after she moved into her dorm. "Thanks for the care package. Mom said it was from you. I'm really busy, but it was nice to get something from home." No punctuation. No photo attached. I read it twice before deleting it. The mug I had sent with her name, painted in soft green, hadn't made an appearance in any of her pictures. Sometimes forgetting is not erasure. It's simply never having been seen clearly to begin with. At Thanksgiving, Julia asked me to bring extra napkins. Not stuffing, not pie, not cranberry sauce. Napkins. "I know how tired you get, Mom. This way, you don't overdo it." I brought 3 packs, one plain, one with leaves, and one that said, "Thankful always." I stacked them on the table. By evening's end, only the plain ones had been used. I took the others home. Henry once told me that I was the quiet center of the family, that people circled around me even if they didn't notice. Maybe he meant it as comfort. Maybe he knew that being a center is different than being seen. I opened the box again last night, just to check that it was all still there. The cards hadn't faded. The tags still curled slightly at the corners. I placed a new one on top, a birthday card I'd bought for myself and never given. It had a field of wildflowers on the front and no printed message inside. I had written nothing in it, just my name. Not Mom, not Grandma, Not Mrs. Whitaker, just Clara. I closed the box and pushed it gently back beneath the sweaters I no longer wear, the ones with faint perfume still clinging to their collars. It wasn't bitterness that rose. It wasn't anything sharp, just the weight of continuity. No one had tried to forget me. They simply hadn't practiced remembering. And I had helped them learn how. There's a particular tone people use when they've made decisions for you, not out of cruelty, but convenience. It sounds like concern softened at the edges, wrapped in words like helpful and manageable. I've learned that when a sentence begins with, "We've been thinking," it rarely includes me. Julia's face appeared first. Bright lighting. Lipstick slightly too bold. "You're going to love this, Mom. We've cleared out the basement. There's even a private entrance now." Mark chimed in before I could reply. "I told her you'd be hesitant at first, but it really is the best solution. The house is too much for you now." There was a framed diploma behind him, Ellie's maybe, or one of his own, still polished with importance. I stared at the glare in the glass, watching my reflection shift as he moved. Julia continued, "We just think it makes more sense. You'll be close to us. You won't have to deal with yard work or plumbing issues. And Ellie can use the upstairs when she's home. Her space has always felt cramped." I folded the cloth napkin in my lap once, twice, and again. No food in front of me. I hadn't planned to eat. Sometimes I set the table out of habit. Sometimes I forget why I started folding at all. Mark leaned forward. "Craig has someone ready to put in an offer. He says $350,000 is a good number, especially in this market. All cash, no delays." I waited. Julia shifted in her seat. "We figured the proceeds could go towards something useful. Ellie's housing. Your new space. Mark's business has been tight since January. It would help clear some things up." Mark nodded. "It's not about taking anything from you. We just need to move quickly. You'll sign and we'll handle the rest." I asked what the paperwork had said. The room fell still for a moment, like a curtain had been pulled taut behind them. "There's a temporary designation," Julia explained, brushing something off her blouse that wasn't there. "After Dad passed, there was that power of attorney document. You remember? It allowed us to oversee things." Mark added, "Technically, we were able to assign joint ownership until the estate cleared, just to smooth things." I looked down at my hands. The veins have risen more lately. The ring on my left finger still turns when I press my thumb to it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It wasn't meant to be secret," Julia said. "We were trying to avoid stress. You've had enough." Mark's eyes darted off screen for a second, probably glancing at his watch or another notification. "We didn't want to overwhelm you with forms. We know how that can be." "I see." Julia smiled the way people do when they think they've been patient. "This is really a win-win. You'll be safe, comfortable, and everything will be in good hands." The call ended without a thank you, without a question, without anyone saying Henry's name. Afterward, I sat at the edge of the bed and looked at the drawer I hadn't opened since he passed. It's the one that sticks slightly, where he used to keep utility bills and receipts folded into long envelopes. I've dusted the surface often, but never reached for the handle. They had referred to the house as a thing to manage, not a place, not a home, just something that had a dollar amount and a buyer with cash. They never mentioned where my books would go, or the quilt Henry's mother stitched during that winter he was away in Michigan, or the letters tucked inside the old piano bench. They spoke of furniture, not photographs. They didn't ask what I wanted, only what would be easiest for them. "Just sign," Mark had said. "We've taken care of the rest." They talked about me the way you talk about furniture too large for the new apartment, with a certain fondness, with a certain urgency. The basement they offered had a broken heating vent the last time I visited. Julia had stored plastic bins there labeled Seasonal Crafts Miscellaneous. I imagined my life fitting neatly between crafts and miscellaneous. Ellie's name came up again and again. She needs space. She could use the upstairs. She's been through a lot. I kept the envelope they'd mailed with the original forms. The flap was still sealed. The return address in Julia's handwriting quick and slanted. She had underlined important on the back in blue ink. Not my name. It occurred to me that I was being moved, not invited, relocated like an outdated filing cabinet, still useful, still sturdy, but in the way. They had chosen numbers over names, plans over presents. No one asked where Henry's letters were kept. No one asked if I still wore his robe when it got cold at night. I remembered Julia once calling me efficient. I had baked 6 loaves of bread for the church potluck, wrapped and labeled. She hadn't meant it as a compliment. You're always so thorough. I remembered Mark once handing me a set of instructions for assembling a shelf. You're better with these things, Mom. I never have the patience. They knew what I was good for. They had just stopped thinking that meant being known. I looked toward the drawer again. Inside, I suspected, were papers Henry had saved, notes I hadn't read, details he didn't think to share when he assumed I'd outlive him. He never liked meetings. He always said the important things got buried in what's next. There would be signatures. There might be surprises. Or maybe only more silence. I didn't reach for the drawer that night. I smoothed the quilt beside me, one edge fraying, a thread pulled long, like a line someone started and never finished. They had made their plans. They had calculated what I was worth, split 3 ways, taxed and repurposed. They would wait for me to comply. They were used to waiting. They believed they understood me. But I was beginning to understand something too. Even a forgotten item left long enough in a corner becomes part of the foundation. And not all corners are empty. Some are simply quiet. Some drawers don't creak. They sigh, as if they know what they've been holding. The one I opened had a tight slide to the left. I'd avoided it for weeks, perhaps longer. The wood had dulled in the corners where Henry's hand used to rest. I didn't need to look inside to know what was there. But I looked anyway. First came the envelopes, neatly labeled. A rhythm in his handwriting, precise but never stiff. He had always filed things alphabetically, not because anyone asked, but because the world made more sense that way to him. Banking, retirement, Granada. It wasn't the files that slowed my breath. It was the folded sheet, thinner than the rest, tucked in a sleeve, with no label, no seal. Only my name written in lowercase, as if whispered. Clara, if you're reading this, it began, I'm no longer there to make you tea after your knees ache. He had drawn a tiny smile beside it, just 2 dots and a curved line. The way he used to sign birthday notes when we were too broke for gifts, but never too tired to laugh. You are not left over. You are not in the way. You are the one I built this life around. So I've left you a place to rest when you're ready, and if you choose. You won't need anyone's permission. You never did. The next sheet was a map. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The red circle was drawn near the southern edge of Spain, Granada, not far from where we once stayed a week during our 25th anniversary trip. I had forgotten the villa's name, but he hadn't. The key attached was old brass, smooth at the edges. He'd tied a ribbon around it. Blue, faded now, but still intact. I didn't cry. There was another folder, heavier. Legal. I didn't understand every word, but I understood enough. He had placed the Roanoke house solely in my name 3 years ago. No co-signers. No shared title. I called Barbara Monroe. She'd handled Henry's paperwork before, though I'd never been present during those meetings. Her voice hadn't changed. Clara, she said, not Mrs. Whitaker. I was wondering when you might reach out. She confirmed it all. The villa was purchased through a separate trust, quietly, legally, and in full. He hadn't told the children. He hadn't included them. There's a secondary account, she told me. 75,000 available for your discretion. No conditions. She asked if I had questions. I didn't. They don't know, I said. No, she replied. And they never needed to. I thanked her. Not with words, but with the way I didn't ask for more. When I got home, I opened the printer drawer. I hadn't touched it since Ellie's high school essays. The cartridges were dry, but the machine still worked. I printed copies of the titles and deeds. Mark and Julia had assumed wrongly that what they managed was still theirs to sort. I wondered if they'd feel betrayed. I suspected not. Only surprised that something had slipped beyond their reach. I didn't write them a warning. I didn't call to correct their assumptions. I opened the closet instead and began choosing what wouldn't come with me. 1 scarf, 2 sweaters. The painting Henry had bought at a roadside market and hung slightly crooked because he insisted things don't have to be straight to be worth looking at. I took photographs of the rest, not for nostalgia, for record. Later that week, I printed 1 letter. Short, straight margins. I will be leaving. I don't require your input. I've learned not to expect it. I placed it in separate envelopes, no return address. I didn't sign the bottom with Mom. I looked again at the key. I held it like something small, but rooted like a seed with a memory. They had offered me a basement. I had been given a country. They had measured out portions. Henry had left me whole. I wrapped the map in a linen cloth, one we'd bought together in Valencia. It had frayed corners but still smelled faintly of cedar from the old hope chest. I didn't make a list of items to bring. I made a list of names I wouldn't carry forward. I didn't respond to Julia's text about checking in on those signatures. I let it sit unread. Blue bubble. Still hanging. I opened the guest room closet. I placed the birthday cards, the unused gifts, the wedding photos into a box labeled Leave. Not trash, just leave. They wanted me to slide quietly into the background. They would get what they wanted, but not the way they expected. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't explain. I would simply vanish from their plans, not as an omission, but as a decision. I closed the box. No tape, just the weight of the lid. I looked around the room one last time, not for what I'd lose, but for what I no longer needed to keep. There was no music, no echo of Henry's voice, just the soft whisper of a drawer that at last closed on its own. There's a quiet that doesn't feel like punishment. The house was smaller than I'd pictured. From the outside, it leaned gently with time, as if it had grown into the land instead of being built on top of it. The shutters were the color of faded denim, the walls smooth with white lime wash that softened in the sun. A terrace ran along the side, scattered with terracotta pots and small, unnamed plants I didn't recognize. Rosa met me with a nod, not a hug. She took the key from my hand like someone who'd been keeping a promise. She didn't ask who I was or why I'd come. She only said, "Your husband left instructions to keep it ready." I did. There was no ceremony, no welcome basket. Just fresh sheets, warm water, and a kitchen stocked with what I might need if I remembered how to feed myself. I sat on the bed that first night without undoing the blankets. The air smelled like olive branches and old stone. I didn't touch anything. I listened. There were no upstairs footsteps, no dishwasher humming, no voice calling down to ask if I'd seen their keys. No one needed me to be anything. In the morning, I boiled water slowly, deliberately, and drank it without sugar. The mugs were hand-painted. One had a chip in the rim shaped like a crescent moon. I chose that one. I always did. Rosa came by that afternoon. She brought bread, hard cheese, and small green olives in a glass jar. She handed me a notebook. "Write what you want to remember," she said. I opened it and wrote, "Boiled water, chipped mug." No one asking why. The second day, I unpacked what I had brought. 3 sweaters, 1 picture frame, the envelope with Henry's note. I left the rest in the suitcases zipped tight, pushed under the bed. I cleaned the kitchen with water and vinegar. I swept the terrace with a stiff broom. No one expected me to. No one noticed if I didn't. I walked to the market by myself on the 3rd morning. The stalls were close together, the words quick and unfamiliar. I didn't understand much, but no one laughed. A boy pointed to the peaches I had touched and gave me one for free. I sat on a low stone wall to eat it. The juice ran down my palm, sweet and sticky. I didn't wipe it away. I let the ants find me. That night, Rosa returned. She didn't stay long, just long enough to hand me a small slip of paper. Panaderia. Mejor pan. Ask for Emilio. She paused, then added, "He taught Henry how to ask for bread." That made something ache inside me, not because it was tender, but because I hadn't known. On the 4th evening, I found the switch that lit the terrace string lights. I didn't use them. I liked the way darkness shaped the house, soft at the edges, undefined. I poured a glass of red wine. The bottle had no label. It was half full already. Rosa must have left it. I took it to the terrace and sat with my back to the wall, watching the last train of sunlight slip behind the hill. No one interrupted. No voice asked where I'd gone. No footsteps lingered at the door. I wrote in the notebook, "Not invisible, just not expected." The kitchen clock ticked without urgency. The house had no mirrors in the hallway, no framed family photos. Only 2 oil paintings, both of open fields, neither signed. I liked that. Some days I didn't speak aloud. My voice would have startled me. When I did, it was in small Spanish phrases Rosa had repeated. "Gracias. No necesito bolsa. Solo uno, por favor." I hadn't realized how quiet I had become until even my thoughts used fewer words. At the end of the week, I opened a drawer in the bedroom. Inside was a stack of postcards Henry must have bought Granada's rooftops, the Alhambra at dusk, a woman carrying jugs in each hand. None had been written on. I picked one. On the back, I wrote in block letters, "I am safe. I am not waiting. I didn't address it. I didn't send it." Some things are only meant to be written once. In the evenings, I began cooking again. Slowly, awkwardly. I burned the first pan of rice, oversalted the lentils. No one commented. No one said, "Maybe next time just order something." I kept the chipped mug on the windowsill. It caught the morning light just right. One afternoon, I received an email from Mark. Short, formal. "We need to discuss the property transfer. It's urgent. Please respond." I didn't. Another came from Julia 2 days later. "Mom, I don't know what game you're playing, but disappearing isn't fair." I stared at it. The word fair sat heavy on the screen. I closed the laptop and poured another glass of wine. The silence wasn't cold. It was precise. It gave shape to the space I now claimed. I walked the length of the terrace barefoot. The tiles still held the day's warmth. My feet remembered that kind of grounding. I no longer wore the soft gold band on my left hand. I had placed it in the bottom drawer beneath the postcards. Not hidden, not gone. Just resting. I was not lost. I was not found. I was simply here. The wine bottle was nearly empty when I sat again. The breeze came in from the coast, lifting the linen of my sleeve. I didn't shiver. I didn't wish for company. I let the quiet hold me not as an echo of what was taken, but as proof of what I chose. I wrote nothing that night. I only listened to the sound of myself no longer muted. Just enough. Some people only remember you when your absence becomes expensive. I was writing that morning, just a sentence or two in the notebook Rosa had given me when the phone buzzed once. Then again. Then 3 more times in the span of a minute. I didn't look right away. I finished my line first. The sun had just slipped past the kitchen curtain, leaving a streak of gold across the tiles. When I turned the phone over, I saw the names in stacked order: Mark, then Julia, then Natalie. I let the screen go black again. No one had called when my hands went numb for days that winter. No one asked if I had heat. But now, when the house deed no longer listed them, there was a sense of urgency. I played the voicemail from Mark first. He spoke in that voice people use at airports, too loud to be polite, too public to be sincere. "We really need to talk, Mom. I heard you transferred ownership of the Roanoke house. That's not what we agreed on." I deleted the message. Then Julia's came next, clipped and quick. "Why didn't you tell us Ellie's financial aid was based on your asset contribution? I told the school you'd help cover housing, now it all collapses. You've made everything harder than it had to be." I didn't remember agreeing to anything. I didn't remember anyone asking. A FaceTime call came in while I was still holding the phone. Natalie this time. I declined. A second later, another one lit up Mark again. I picked up more out of silence than resolve. "Mom, you don't understand how complicated this gets. The taxes, the planning, we needed that house to sell this year. Now Craig says it's not even in your name anymore. You moved it under some trust, or... Do you remember the last time you called me just to ask how I was?" That stopped him. I heard the pause. The kind people fill with paper shuffling or throat clearing. I mean, that's not the point right now. It's exactly the point. He sighed the way people do when they think you're being unreasonable, but they're too polite to say so out loud. I just thought we were all on the same page. I was never given the page to begin with. I ended the call. The next voice came later that afternoon. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It trembled. "Grandma." The video came into focus. Ellie's face blotched and red. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who'd finally taken the earbuds out after years of being tuned into something else. "I just found out. About the money, about the house. I saw the bank alerts. You've been helping me all this time, and I didn't know." She wasn't whispering for effect. It was the kind of voice people use when they don't want to hear their own guilt echo. I let her talk. She didn't rush to defend her parents. She didn't ask for clarification. She told me it was a loan. She said they were cutting everything to help me stay in school. I believed her. I didn't offer a correction. Ellie wiped her cheek with her sleeve. "There's this log of transfers. From you. Monthly. Every tuition cycle. Why didn't you tell me I reached for the chipped cup?" It was cold now. The tea I'd made sat forgotten beside the notebook. "I didn't think you wanted to know." People rarely ask questions when they're comfortable with the answers they've been given. I should have known. You were always the one waiting in the car after choir. You packed the sandwiches that summer I had braces. You sent me notes during finals even when I didn't answer. I didn't see it then. I thought you were just around. But I think maybe you were the only one who stayed. The light in the kitchen shifted, catching the corner of the curtain. I saw Henry's handwriting framed in the background, a line he once wrote on a napkin. "You don't owe anyone your silence just because they're louder." "You still have time," I said, "to pay attention. That's all it takes sometimes." Ellie bit her lip. "Do you have room? I don't mean permanently, just room for someone who wants to remember how to be good." I looked past the phone. The second bedroom in this house had a window that faced the olive trees. The bed was made. I'd made it 2 days ago, even though no one was coming. There's a bed by the window. And one lesson to start: never let anyone assign value to love based on a receipt. She didn't speak after that. I ended the call gently without saying goodbye. I didn't need to. The mug left a faint ring on the table. I didn't wipe it away. I let it sit there, just proof of presence. Something had been held. Something had been poured. Something remained. I used to think stillness meant being forgotten. Now it arrives like steam curling from a teacup, soft, unhurried, and certain of its place. I could hear Ellie in the next room, humming faintly off-key, but unbothered. She'd taken to washing her clothes by hand and hanging them in the courtyard. I'd offered her the washer, but she said something about liking the rhythm of her own labor. The first time she said it, her voice cracked a little, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to enjoy choosing for herself. The kitchen held traces of us both now. She left her books stacked by the window, sometimes open dog-eared with margins inked in looping cursive. I never told her to put them away. Every morning I made coffee the old way, pouring it through a metal filter Rosa had taught me to use. I no longer rushed. No one expected me to deliver anything hot to the table while they scrolled their phones. Ellie brewed tea for herself, chamomile, or something green and citrusy. The cups clinked gently as we moved, never in the way of each other. She spoke more to herself now. Words came out in half Spanish, half thought. Abuela, she called me once, quietly testing the word on her tongue, like it might resist her. I didn't correct her. I just placed a bowl of figs on the table and turned the page of my book. One afternoon, she brought home a clay tile with a sunflower etched in it. Her hands were stained with ochre and the pale gray of unfinished glaze. "They let me keep it," she murmured, placing it near the window. "It's not perfect." The center cracked. I traced the fracture with my finger. It held anyway. Later that evening, she asked without looking up from her bowl of soup, "Did you ever feel like you were just background noise?" I let the silence stretch before answering. I didn't feel like that. I was treated like that. There's a difference. She stared at the tile again. "I used to think Grandma was just the one who baked too much. And now I think you were the only one who saw everything. And still stayed." I folded my napkin slowly. There was nothing to say that wouldn't unravel the peace we'd begun to earn. Ellie had started tying her hair up with a cloth instead of heat styling it every day. Her phone, once an extension of her hand, now lived in a drawer unless we needed directions or translated phrases. She greeted Rosa in Spanish with a little bow, helped shell peas, and press fresh cheese. There was no pretense in her movements. It reminded me of myself when I was still a girl, before I learned how to stand just outside the center of every room. Each evening, she read aloud from whatever she was studying, Virginia Woolf one night, a Spanish cookbook the next. She paused over foreign words, waiting for my nod or my shrug, and we laughed over misunderstandings. One morning, I watched her kneel in the garden to replant a drooping lavender bush. Dirt under her nails, knees pressing into stone, back arched awkwardly. She didn't ask for help. She didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. She just worked. I wrote that afternoon. The pages didn't scare me anymore. I wrote about the years I wasn't invited to speak the birthday cards that never included my name, the house filled with voices that moved around me but never toward me. I wrote about Henry's silence, not cruel, just practiced. The way he used to leave the TV on while he read the paper so the quiet wouldn't become too loud. When the email came, it had no drama. Just a subject line, transfer complete. You are now the sole decision maker. The cursor hovered over the blue button for a while before I clicked it. My hands didn't shake. I didn't call anyone. I left the screen open as I made tea. Ellie came into the room, towel wrapped around her damp hair, a clay smudge on her cheek. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the screen. Just a confirmation. She looked closer. It's official. I folded the dish towel over the edge of the sink. It always was. They just didn't believe me. She reached for the mug I'd just poured. I saw what Natalie posted online. Mother-in-law disappeared, left us in financial ruin. I stirred honey into my cup. Noise. She's painting you like the villain. She's confused. She thinks silence equals guilt. But silence in my case was simply me choosing not to enter a conversation that was never mine to begin with. Ellie blinked. Julia emailed. Wants to settle things before it becomes a public embarrassment. I set my spoon down. Let it embarrass them. They earned it. Ellie exhaled slowly. You're different now. I'm not, I answered. I'm just no longer pretending. Outside, the olive branches shifted in the breeze. I watched them for a long time. Ellie walked over to the desk, picked up my notebook. Can I read some? Not yet? She nodded, didn't push. Then, can I stay for a while? Not forever, just until I remember how to be someone I'd want to spend time with. I looked at the sunflower tile by the window, the crack barely noticeable in the afternoon light. There's a second bedroom, I said. The sheets are clean. And there's an old typewriter in the closet. If you want to write something, no one else has to see. She smiled, small and unsure. Later that night, I lit a single candle and wrote one more line in my journal. Some people lose you and they panic, not because they loved you, but because they lost their grip. I closed the book. The candle flickered, and I let the quiet settle not as absence, but as proof. I didn't expect the sound of packing tape to feel like punctuation, but it did final and without ceremony. The box wasn't heavy. A folder of bank statements. A worn ledger with Ellie's tuition transfers, each amount in my handwriting initials in the margin like I used to do with grocery lists. An envelope of birthday cards all sent and never returned. I slid in a single letter one Henry had written in ink that had faded to a faint rust. It opened with her name but ended with mine. Not ours. Mine. I sealed it slowly, pressing along the edge with the side of my palm. There was nothing more to fit. Nothing more that would be understood. The other envelope was thinner. No return address. Inside, a single sheet. You may keep what you've calculated, Mark. The rest belongs to those who live beyond numbers. I signed it with my full name. Then below it, I signed again, Clara Bird. The pen paused between the two words. I hadn't written that name in over 40 years, but it didn't shake. It didn't hesitate. It simply returned. A copy of the legal name change had already been sent to the clerk's office. A new passport would follow. The name on the deed to the house in Roanoke was no longer mine. The name on the deed in Granada now reflected someone who had chosen it, not inherited it. It wasn't about erasing anything. I wasn't reaching back to undo my marriage or my motherhood or even my silences. I was reaching inward, not backward. There's a difference. Ellie helped me carry the box to the post office. She didn't ask what was in it. She didn't need to. We walked slowly through olive groves beginning to turn silver in the breeze. Her hands were stained again blue, this time from cobalt, used in the pottery glaze. She moved with the lightness of someone who no longer performs for applause. Later, I sold the chair, Henry's chair, the only piece of him I had hesitated over. I had sat in it once alone in the middle of the night, hands folded tight in my lap, feet not touching the floor. It had always made me feel smaller than I was. I had asked myself once, what would it mean to keep this? And I had no answer. So I let it go. I wrote a line in my journal that night. I do not need to possess a memory to honor it. I choose to live in a way that keeps it breathing. Ellie read it over my shoulder, then kissed the top of my head without a word. That morning, we fixed a wooden plaque to the gate. The letters weren't carved evenly. She'd used an old soldering tool from Rosa's cousin. But I liked the crooked charm of it. Casa bird mujeres, que eligen su propio camino. House of bird where women choose their own way. We stood there squinting at it. Ellie tilted her head. Do you think they'll see it back home? I folded the cloth in my hands. It doesn't matter if they do. She nodded. Still, it feels good to name a place for what it really is. There had been another email. Julia again. This time, no caps lock, no threats, just Mom. This is hard for all of us. Can't we return to how things were for the sake of the family's name? I didn't reply. I printed it, folded it, slipped it into the back of my recipe journal where the flap had come loose. Ellie looked up from her bowl of sliced fruit. You didn't answer her. I stirred the tea. Not every sound deserves an echo. She smiled, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. I used to think you were quiet because you were weak, she said. Now I wonder if you were just waiting. I looked out toward the sea. I think I was waiting for myself. There were no loud reconciliations, no apologies mailed in gold foil envelopes, just distance and then silence. Not the kind that punishes, the kind that holds. I mailed a third envelope a few days later. No note, no ribbon. Inside was the family registry, the copy that used to hang in our hallway, framed in cheap oak. I had removed it, rolled it tightly, and now returned it to them. I had no use for a document where my name appeared beneath theirs like an afterthought. No one responded. The silence suited me. That evening, Ellie set up her wheel in the back courtyard. Her palms moved slow and sure over the clay. I brought her lemonade and didn't speak. She didn't look up. That was enough. Later, I sat down at my desk. I didn't write in the journal. I didn't need to. I opened a drawer and placed a single item inside the ring Henry had given me when we first married. I hadn't worn it since Roanoke. The gold had thinned with time. One of the small inset stones had fallen out long ago. I had kept it anyway. But it didn't belong on my hand anymore. It had served its season. As I closed the drawer, the latch clicked into place, soft but firm. That night I didn't dream of Roanoke. I didn't dream of Henry. I dreamt of a white wall, bare and waiting, and my own name written across it, not in pen, but in color, in movement, in clay. In the dream, no one stood behind me. No one corrected the spelling. And still it was right. I woke without alarm. Just breath. No applause. Just a decision made in silence. And that was the ending I had chosen. Some people need applause to exist. I just needed space to breathe without asking permission. The mint leaves in my cup curl slightly when they hit the hot water. I never stir them. Letting them float seems enough. The chipped edge of the old clay mug touches the inside of my wrist when I lift it warm like skin that remembers holding. Ellie's scissors made that soft snapping rhythm, all morning, paper on stone, nothing urgent. She was cutting silhouettes for her ceramics class. Children like outlines, she said. They like tracing something solid. What are you writing about today? Maybe a woman they once called excess, I replied, folding the edge of a page, who later realized she had been the foundation, not the furniture. She smiled not with lips, but the way her shoulders settled back. My manuscript sits under a linen cloth. The cover reads, "If only Mother wasn't just Mother." There are no chapters labeled blame, no underlined outbursts. Just pages where facts breathe and memory is allowed to stand upright. Ellie hasn't mailed her application to Seville. It waits on the bookshelf. She adds to it in pencil, slow and deliberate. She paints, teaches, sometimes just walks barefoot around the lemon tree. At night we read in alternating languages. Neither of us corrects the other anymore. One afternoon, she said over a pot of lentils, "Maybe I don't want to rush becoming someone. Maybe I just want to become." We repainted the front gate together, pale green. The bougainvillea reached for it as if relieved to finally have something soft to hold. No more calls from the States. No more statements about what a mother should have done or what a son deserved. No more long silences pretending to be peace. Mark's name showed up in a business headline Ellie read aloud in a neutral tone. A failed investment. Rumors. Frozen accounts. When she turned the page, she didn't look up. Julia's career faded under a post she thought would earn her sympathy. My mother left us with nothing she'd written. But the comments asked, "Are you sure she wasn't just finally leaving you?" I didn't share the article. Ellie placed her phone upside down and said, "That's not justice. It's just clarity." One morning, she left a box on the breakfast table. Inside, 4 photographs printed from an old roll of film. A hand covered in clay paused mid-shape, a lemon just beginning to yellow. My reflection in the window pen in hand, unaware. And her own shadow stretched beside mine, touching the corner of the bench, but never quite overlapping it. "You were never invisible," she said. "Just mislocated." I wore the cardigan Henry gave me for one of our anniversaries. The sleeves have thinned, but the fabric still smells like cedar. I don't wear it for nostalgia. It simply fits better now than it did when I still waited for someone to thank me. The court papers that restored my name to Clara Bird are in a drawer I no longer lock. I didn't sign them in anger. I signed them because I remembered I had a name before I had a role, and a voice before I had a purpose assigned to me. No one here asks who I live for. The grocer just wraps our bread and nods. The librarian places the Spanish translations at my usual table. Even the stray cat that visits each Thursday naps by the door without needing to be invited in. Ellie no longer tries to explain me to anyone. She no longer needs to. She once whispered as she hung her coat. They weren't punished. They were just left alone with themselves. I didn't reply. Some truths don't need confirmation to be whole. She bought me a fountain pen last week. Said it was for writing new things, not rewriting the past. I keep it capped most days. It's enough just knowing it's mine. I no longer fold my shoulders inward when someone doesn't remember me. I wear bracelets now not to be seen, but to hear myself in the small clink they make as I reach for something. That sound reminds me I'm still reaching. If someone were to ask now, "Who do you live with?" I wouldn't give names. I'd say, with someone who sees me without needing explanation, and with myself fully quietly for the first time. And if no one ever asks, that's fine too. Some blooms open just for the wind.